It all started on what should have been a normal weekend morning. The sun was just starting to rise over the neighborhood, casting a golden glow across rows of nearly identical houses. My street was one of those carefully planned suburban developments where everything looked picture-perfect from the outside. The lawns were neatly trimmed, the driveways spotless, and the houses painted in those approved colors chosen by the HOA. For the most part, it was a quiet, uneventful place to live. That is, until Karen moved in. She lived 2 houses down from me, and right from the beginning, she made it her mission to involve herself in everyone's business. She had that uncanny ability to spot the tiniest detail she didn't like, magnify it into a full-blown issue, and then parade it around the neighborhood like it was the crime of the century. To Karen, nothing was too small to complain about. A slightly crooked mailbox, a holiday decoration left up a week too long, or a trash can sitting at the curb for 10 extra minutes. She noticed it all, and she loved reporting it to the HOA. My run-ins with her began with something as trivial as my driveway. I owned a mid-sized SUV, nothing fancy, but it was practical and reliable. Like most people, I parked it in my driveway whenever I came home. But apparently, Karen decided that my car was an eyesore. She claimed it blocked the neighborhood's aesthetic and made the street look crowded. At first, I brushed it off. After all, it was my own driveway. I wasn't breaking any rules, and my car was properly registered, clean, and well kept. But that didn't matter to her. Slowly, her passive-aggressive comments turned into written complaints to the HOA. I received letters in the mail claiming there had been concerns raised by neighbors about my parking habits. It was frustrating, but I wasn't about to let Karen intimidate me. I reviewed the HOA's official guidelines myself, going through every line carefully. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, that prohibited me from parking in my own driveway. Armed with that knowledge, I decided to ignore her harassment. But Karen wasn't someone who gave up easily. When her complaints didn't work, she escalated. The first real sign that things were getting serious happened one weekday afternoon. I returned home from work and found a bright orange sticker slapped across the driver's side window of my SUV. At first glance, it looked like some sort of violation notice, but when I read it closely, my jaw dropped. It wasn't from the HOA, it was a private towing warning, claiming my car was illegally parked and subject to removal. My blood boiled. Illegally parked? On my own property? That didn't make any sense. The sticker didn't have the official HOA logo or any city markings. It was clearly printed by some towing company Karen had called. I peeled it off and tossed it into the trash. But I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my gut. It was obvious now that Karen wasn't just bluffing, she was actively trying to get my car removed. And if she'd gone this far already, what was stopping her from actually calling a tow truck? That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. My driveway was supposed to be the safest place for my car. The idea that someone could just roll in, hook it up, and drag it away felt unreal. But with Karen involved, I knew it wasn't just paranoia. She wanted me gone, and she was more than willing to bend or break the rules to get her way. So I decided to do something about it. The next morning, I drove to the local electronics store and purchased a set of high-definition security cameras. They weren't cheap, but I considered it an investment in peace of mind. I installed 2 cameras overlooking the driveway, one mounted under the eaves of my roof and another hidden behind a planter near the garage. Together, they covered every possible angle. For days, nothing happened. I went about my life as usual, parking in my driveway and keeping an eye on the footage every evening. Sometimes, I'd catch Karen walking by, glaring at my car like it had personally offended her. She would slow down, pull out her phone and snap pictures, probably sending them straight to the HOA. But for the most part, it was just silent hostility. Until one Friday night, I was inside the house, unwinding after a long week, when I noticed the faint sound of a heavy vehicle outside. At first, I thought it was just a delivery truck or a neighbor moving something, but the noise lingered longer than it should have. My instincts kicked in, and I pulled up the live feed from my driveway camera on my phone. What I saw made my stomach drop. A tow truck had pulled up directly in front of my house. Its headlights were off, and the driver was slowly backing up toward my SUV. Standing off to the side, with her arms crossed and a smug expression on her face, was none other than Karen. She was actually doing it. She had really called a tow truck to take my car from my own driveway. My heart raced, but at the same time a strange calm washed over me. This was exactly what I had prepared for. Every second of this stunt was being recorded in crystal-clear detail. From the truck pulling in, to Karen standing there supervising, to the driver lowering the hook. It was all captured. I didn't rush outside. I didn't scream or confront them. Instead, I stayed put, letting the cameras do their job. Because deep down, I knew this footage was going to be my ultimate weapon. As the tow truck driver climbed out and started inspecting my SUV, Karen leaned in closer, pointing at the front tires like she was giving instructions. Her confidence was almost laughable. She truly believed she was about to win, but what she didn't know was that her little scheme was about to collapse around her. And as I watched the scene unfold, I realized something important. This wasn't just about a car anymore. This was about standing up to someone who thought they could bully their neighbors into submission. Karen had made her move. Now, it was time for me to make mine. The tow truck sat in front of my house, rumbling quietly in the dark like a predator waiting for its prey. The driver hopped down from the cab, moving slowly and deliberately as if he'd done this kind of job 100 times before. He didn't look nervous at all, which told me something important. This wasn't the first time Karen had dragged him into one of her schemes. He crouched beside my SUV, flashlight in hand, checking under the chassis to find the best spot to attach his hooks. Karen hovered nearby, her posture stiff, her face twisted into that smug grin she wore whenever she thought she was in control. She pointed toward the wheels like a self-appointed authority figure, whispering instructions as if she had the power to dictate what happened on my property. Inside my house, I watched everything unfold on the camera feed. Every movement, every smirk, every careless gesture was being recorded in high-definition clarity. I could even hear fragments of sound. The metallic clank of chains, the scrape of equipment being dragged across asphalt, and Karen's voice carried faintly by the night air. At first, I considered storming outside immediately, shouting them down and forcing them to leave. But then I reminded myself, anger was exactly what Karen wanted. She wanted a reaction, something she could twist around later and claim I had been aggressive or threatening. No, the smarter move was to wait. Patience was my weapon, and the footage was my ammunition. The tow truck driver moved with efficiency. He slid one of the hooks into place beneath the front of my SUV, then dragged the heavy chain across with a loud metallic scrape. Karen flinched slightly at the sound, but quickly composed herself, clutching her phone in one hand, probably ready to record her own version of events. She looked around briefly, making sure no one else in the neighborhood was watching, before leaning back with satisfaction. As I watched her, something became crystal clear. This wasn't about my car. This was about control. Karen wanted to establish herself as the enforcer of the neighborhood, the self-proclaimed sheriff of the cul-de-sac. She wanted to prove that if she didn't like something, she could remove it, no matter whose property it was on. But what she didn't realize was that by taking this step, she had crossed into dangerous territory, legally and socially. The driver attached the second hook, and that was the moment I decided it was time to intervene. Not recklessly, not with shouting or threats, but calmly and methodically. I wanted them both to know that I had been prepared for this exact scenario. I grabbed my phone, which was already recording the live feed, and slipped outside through the side door of my house. I approached from the shadows of the lawn, my steps quiet against the grass. From where I stood, I could see Karen more clearly than ever. She was practically glowing with anticipation, convinced that she was seconds away from humiliating me in front of the entire community. The tow truck driver, on the other hand, looked slightly less certain. He kept glancing around, as though he knew something wasn't quite right. Maybe he realized that towing a vehicle from a private driveway without proper authorization was a risky move. Maybe he had done this before and gotten away with it. But tonight, something felt different. I let him feel that unease for a moment longer before stepping forward into the driveway light. Karen spotted me immediately. Her smug grin faltered for a split second, then returned even wider, as though she thought my appearance confirmed her victory. She gestured toward me like she had caught a criminal red-handed. The driver straightened up, his hands resting on the tow rig, waiting to see how this would play out. I didn't speak a word. Instead, I raised my phone, holding it high so both of them could see the screen. The display showed the live security footage crystal clear, with every detail captured, from the moment the truck had pulled in to the second the hooks had been attached. The timestamp glowed brightly in the corner of the video, undeniable proof of what was happening. The driver's face changed instantly. His confident posture crumbled into unease, and he shifted his weight nervously, glancing at Karen as if to say, "You didn't tell me we'd be recorded." Karen, however, refused to back down. She crossed her arms, her voice rising slightly, as if volume alone could mask the sinking realization that she'd been caught. Still, I said nothing. Silence was more powerful than anything I could have shouted. By showing them the footage, I had made my point loud and clear. Every second of their attempted theft was documented. The driver muttered something under his breath, shaking his head, and began unhooking the chains from my SUV. His movements were quick, almost frantic, as though he couldn't detach his equipment fast enough. Karen tried to stop him, waving her arms and insisting he finish the job, but he ignored her. He knew the risk wasn't worth it. When the last chain clattered onto the pavement, he yanked the hooks back into the tow rig and slammed the compartment shut. Without another glance in my direction, he climbed into the cab, started the engine, and drove off down the street, leaving Karen standing there alone. The silence that followed was heavy. Karen's face was flushed red, her jaw clenched tight. She turned toward me, clearly struggling to find a way to regain control of the situation, but no matter what excuse she came up with, the truth was undeniable. She had been caught red-handed orchestrating an illegal tow attempt from my private property. I lowered my phone slowly, the camera still rolling, and stepped back toward the house. Again, I didn't need to say anything. The footage would speak louder than any confrontation could. Karen lingered in the driveway for a moment longer, fuming, before storming back toward her house in a huff. Her heels clicked angrily against the pavement, each step echoing her frustration. She disappeared into the darkness, slamming her front door so hard the sound carried down the street. Inside my house, I replayed the footage, watching every angle, every detail. The quality was perfect. The tow truck, the chains, Karen's smug expression, and her active involvement. It was all there, solid, undeniable proof. I saved multiple copies of the video, uploading one to cloud storage, keeping another on an external hard drive, and even sending a copy to my personal email. I wasn't going to risk losing it. This wasn't just evidence. It was my shield. That night, I barely slept, not because I was worried, but because I couldn't stop thinking about what would come next. Karen wouldn't give up easily. People like her never did. She would either double down on her lies or try to twist the story to paint herself as the victim. And if she dragged the HOA into it, things could get messy fast. But for the first time, I felt confident. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to her schemes. I was ahead of her. Karen had tried to trap me, but she was the one who had walked straight into mine. The following morning, the neighborhood was buzzing with whispers. Something as big as a tow truck rolling into the cul-de-sac in the middle of the night didn't go unnoticed. People had peeked through their blinds, caught glimpses of what was happening, and by sunrise, the rumor mill was already spinning. Karen's version of events spread first. She claimed I had been parking illegally, that she was simply enforcing the rules when the tow truck showed up. She painted herself as a concerned neighbor trying to protect property values, framing me as the reckless homeowner who refused to follow the guidelines. But what Karen hadn't counted on was the power of the truth and the undeniable evidence I had on my side. Later that day, an official-looking envelope arrived in my mailbox. The return address was from the HOA. I didn't even need to open it to know what it contained. Sure enough, inside was a formal letter citing complaints raised by multiple residents about the presence of my SUV in the driveway. The wording was stiff, legalistic, and deliberately intimidating. They demanded a written response within 7 days or threatened escalating fines. Reading that letter, I couldn't help but shake my head. This was classic Karen. She had gone running to the HOA, twisting the story to make herself look like the hero and me the villain. She probably assumed that with the board behind her, she finally had the leverage to force me into compliance. What she didn't realize was that I was more than ready. That evening, I sat down at my computer and drafted my response. But instead of filling it with defensive arguments or long explanations, I kept it simple. I attached a USB drive containing the full footage from my driveway cameras, along with a brief letter. In it, I calmly explained that a neighbor had attempted to have my vehicle illegally towed from my private property and that the video evidence spoke for itself. The next day, I dropped the envelope off at the HOA's office and waited. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. 2 days later, I received a phone call from one of the board members, his voice unusually polite. He thanked me for providing the video evidence, admitted they had been misled by certain complaints, and assured me that my vehicle was in no violation of any rules. He even apologized for the inconvenience of the letter, though his tone suggested it pained him to do so. What he didn't say directly, but what I could clearly hear in his hesitant pauses, was that Karen had put them in a very awkward position. By dragging the HOA into her personal vendetta and being exposed on video, she had not only embarrassed herself, but also made the board look foolish for acting on her word without checking the facts. Word spread quickly after that. Somehow, maybe through a frustrated board member, maybe through neighbors who had caught wind of the incident, the story of Karen's failed tow truck stunt became public knowledge in the community. And with it, her reputation crumbled. For years, she had carried herself as the self-appointed guardian of the neighborhood, strutting around with her clipboard and smug grin, barking at anyone who didn't meet her impossibly high standards. But now, everyone saw her for what she really was, a meddling bully who had gone too far. Neighbors who once tolerated her icy greetings now avoided her entirely, People whispered as she walked by, shaking their heads and smirking. Even those who had previously sided with her on smaller issues began to distance themselves. No one wanted to be associated with the woman who tried to steal a car from someone's driveway in the dead of night. Karen, of course, didn't take it well. She doubled down at first, marching door to door with printed copies of fake regulations, insisting she had been right all along. But the more she talked, the worse she made herself look. When people pointed out the video, she dismissed it as edited or taken out of context. But no one bought her excuses. The final blow came at the next HOA meeting. It was held in the usual community hall, a space that normally echoed with dull discussions about landscaping budgets and holiday decoration guidelines. But that night, it was packed with homeowners eager to hear what would happen. Karen showed up early, sitting near the front with a stack of papers clutched tightly in her hands. She looked determined, as though she believed she could still talk her way out of the mess she'd created. When the meeting began, the board addressed the issue head-on. They explained that after reviewing the evidence, it was clear that a resident, without any authorization, had attempted to involve a towing company to remove a vehicle from private property. They made it clear that this was unacceptable behavior and that any future incidents would result in severe consequences. Then, without naming names, they referenced the individual responsible. Everyone in the room knew exactly who they meant. Karen shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her face flushed with embarrassment. The whispers around her grew louder, and by the time the board moved on to the next agenda item, she was already gathering her things and storming out. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The victory was complete without me saying a word. Karen had destroyed her own credibility, and all I had done was shine a light on her actions. In the weeks that followed, life in the neighborhood felt noticeably different. Without Karen constantly prowling the sidewalks, taking notes, and filing complaints, people seemed more relaxed. Kids played outside longer, neighbors chatted more freely, and the atmosphere softened. As for me, I kept parking in my driveway, exactly as I always had. Every time I walked past my SUV, I couldn't help but feel a small surge of satisfaction. Not because I had won against Karen, but because I had proven that standing your ground calmly and smartly was far more powerful than stooping to her level. The cameras remained in place, of course. They had been my shield once, and I knew they could be again if needed. But as the months passed, they captured less and less drama. Karen's attempts to stir trouble dwindled until eventually she became almost invisible in the neighborhood. Rumor had it she was considering selling her house and moving somewhere new, though whether that was true or just wishful thinking, I couldn't be sure. In the end, the whole ordeal had taught me something important. In a community ruled by appearances and petty power struggles, it was easy to get caught up in the drama, but the key was never to let yourself be dragged down into the mud. By staying calm, documenting the truth, and letting evidence speak louder than emotions, you could dismantle even the loudest bully. Karen had tried to tow my car from my own driveway. She had tried to humiliate me, control me, and make me bend to her will. Instead, she exposed herself for what she was, and the neighborhood would never look at her the same way again. And every time I replayed that video, Karen standing smugly beside the tow truck as the driver hooked up my SUV, only to slink away when the truth came out, I couldn't help but smile. Because in the end, the trap she thought she had set for me was the one she walked straight into herself.